I would like to begin with a passage from Sri Aurobindo's epic poem Savitri, because I feel this passage kind of points to Sri Aurobindo's own way of working, which was very silent in the background and yet very powerful in its results. When darkness deepens, strangling the earth's breast, and man's corporeal mind is the only lamp, as a thief's in the night shall be the covert tread of one who steps unseen into his house. A few shall see what none yet understands. God shall grow up while the wise men talk and sleep, for man shall not know the coming till its hour, and belief shall be not till the work is done. India was asleep when Sri Aurobindo entered the scene of Indian politics in 1893. This was the year of his return to India after a 14-year-long stay in England. At that time, he was 20. His entry was quiet, his action unobserved, for he preferred working behind the scenes and setting events into motion with far-reaching results. This is the primary reason why so little is known and even less acknowledged about his invaluable contribution to India's freedom struggle. From 1893 to 1906, Sri Aurobindo was based in Baroda in the service of its Maharaja. While he could not openly engage in revolutionary activities, he developed and put into motion a revolutionary plan to awaken India and create an aspiration for Purna Swaraj, complete independence from the British in the Indian psyche. The first obstacle in this work was the supplicatory approach of the Indian National Congress at that time. It sought favors from the British without any action to become free from their yoke. One of his first acts was to write a series of articles in a Bombay-based weekly in which he examined the Congress policy, approach, and action and denounced it in no uncertain terms. He wrote, "I say of the Congress that we are at present the blind led, if not by the blind, at any rate by the one-eyed. And further, if we are indeed to renovate our country, we must no longer hold out supplicating hands to the English Parliament, but must recognize the hard truth that every nation must beat out its own path to salvation with pain and difficulty and not rely on the tutelage of another." He was keen-sighted to go to the root of the problem facing India in its efforts for independence. He wrote, "Our actual enemy is not any force exterior to ourselves, but our own crying weaknesses, our cowardice, our selfishness, our hypocrisy, our purblind sentimentalism." His singular aim in entering the political scene was to get into the mind of the people a settled will for freedom and the necessity of a struggle to achieve it. You see what had happened after 1857 independence struggle, where the national fervor was on the rise. Years of supplicatory politics and approach had kind of dulled that fervor. So this is the scene into which Sri Aurobindo entered in 1893 and had to revive this sleeping national spirit again. To address the problem of building up India's inner and psychological strength, as well as channelize its energies for dynamic and assertive action, Sri Aurobindo devised a three-pronged strategy. One, to create a secret revolutionary organization capable of armed insurrection. Second, to establish a countrywide propaganda drive to bring Indian society around to the ideal of independence. And third, to set up a broad-based popular movement of passive resistance and non-cooperation with the British regime. Sri Aurobindo was very clear that the work of change had to begin with each person, their own psychological makeup, their inner domains, and express itself in the outer. And yet the two had to go together simultaneously. The building up of the inner foundations of the people and the outer work of organizing the people, awakening this call for complete independence, of equipping them with psychological as well as physical and moral strength. His approach was to build up from ground up. In 1901, while he was still in Baroda, he sent his first deputy to Bengal to set up samitis in every town and village to train youth physically and psychologically. It is important to note that while Sri Aurobindo did not advocate violence, he did not shy away from it either. He looked upon India as his mother. He wrote to his wife, "What would a son do if a demon sat on his mother's breast and started sucking her blood? I know I have the strength to deliver this fallen race. It is not physical strength, but the strength of knowledge. This feeling is not new in me. It is not of today. I was born with it. It is in my very marrow. God sent me to earth to accomplish this great mission." So, we often talk of, the greatness of Indian civilization, the past and all that. But then we forget to ask, if India was so great, it had such wonderful tradition of so many scriptures, sciences, practices, etc., how come it was conquered by so many different people and finally by such a small nation as England? And at the core of this problem lies the dwindling inner strength of the Indian people by a life-shunning spirituality. I'm not going further into that, but this is something to ponder upon. One of his major contributions was to instill this sentiment in the youth to look upon the country as one's mother, with life, with power. Through his political action, the cry of Bande Mataram was to resound once again in India, firing up the youth with the ardor to overthrow the British rule at any cost and free their motherland. After the 1905 partition of Bengal, Sri Aurobindo decided to quit his service at Baroda and shift to Kolkata, the center of political action at that time. He had been touring India, meeting people, and was already in touch with Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Bipin Chandra Pal, who were aligned to more extreme measures than the moderates in Congress. The moderates were not comfortable with the demand for Swadeshi. However, in the December 1906 session of the Congress, the efforts of the nationalists, that is Sri Aurobindo, Lala Lajpat Rai and Bipin Chandra Pal amongst others, succeeded. The resolution for Swaraj, Swadeshi, boycott and national education was passed after much resistance. In fact, inadvertently, the moderate leader of Congress concluded the session declaring Swaraj as a goal. While he meant it as a form of colonial autonomy, the nationalists took up the cry for complete independence. This cry for Swaraj was yet another major contribution of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo was one of the major forces behind the partition of Congress in 1907. So it's interesting, a person who went on to write The Ideal of Human Unity actually architectured and engineered the split between Congress because it had become necessary as the moderates were refusing to give up their supplicatory stance and refusing to honor their commitment to Swaraj. They were unwilling to accept the 1906 Swaraj resolution as binding. The breakaway group of nationalists formed its own party. What was set in motion in 1907 by Sri Aurobindo, along with the other nationalists, was finally adopted by the Congress in 1916, almost 10 years later, under Tilak's leadership, India's complete independence as the goal, the cry for Purna Swaraj. Sri Aurobindo's prime weapon was his pen. It was not enough for the nation to have the intention for freedom. It must also have knowledge of what they were fighting against and towards what purpose. His articles in the Bengali journal Yugantar and the English daily Bande Matram laid bare the nefarious designs of the British day after day. Sri Aurobindo was also editing these journals, although not openly, otherwise he would have been arrested. The impact was far-reaching. His words reached Gandhi in South Africa and Nehru in England. Every week, excerpts were reproduced in the British press, including the prestigious Times. Sri Aurobindo's scathing exposure of the British intentions through his articles led Lord Minto, the then Viceroy of India, and others in the British government to declare Sri Aurobindo as the most dangerous man with whom they had to deal in India. In line with his strategy to set up a broad-based popular movement of non-cooperation with the British, Sri Aurobindo laid out the doctrine of passive resistance in Bande Matram. While passivity meant to abstain from doing anything, so not just goods, from doing anything that would help the government, Sri Aurobindo did not rule out defensive or even active resistance if faced with violence. There was no turning of the other cheek. In 1908, Sri Aurobindo was incarcerated in Alipur jail along with 39 others. This was a landmark year. While imprisoned, he had several spiritual experiences leading to a conviction that the divine was guiding his trial and ultimate release. Upon coming out of jail after 1 year, he found that the nationalist movement had slackened. Most of the leaders, along with Tilak had been exiled. Yugantar and Bande Matram had closed down. Most samitis, which were training the youth, were driven underground. Such was the state of affairs that Gokhale, who was the Congress president representing the moderates, had even declared the idea of India's independence as an insane and a criminal idea. Not the British. The Indian Congress, the moderates, declared India's independence as an insane and a criminal idea. It was at this time that Sri Aurobindo gave the Uttarpada speech, in which he talked about his spiritual experiences in Alipur jail. He put forth spirituality as the key to India's freedom and future rise. He emphasized the necessity of connecting the daily life, all action, including politics, with spiritual reality. Sri Aurobindo's inner experiences did not result in a life or action shunning spirituality. On the contrary, he once again took up the work of reawakening India single-handedly. Besides carrying on with political tours and speeches, he started 2 journals, Dharma in Bengali and Karma Yogi in English. The Karma Yogi carried articles not only on politics but also on philosophy, yoga, education, art and literature. While his earlier political action had been to prepare India psychologically, emotionally and physically to fight for India's freedom, now he emphasized upon a spiritual revolution. He laid out the ideal of the Karma Yogi, who was not only to fight for India's freedom, but was to build up the nation in tune with its mighty spirit. He wrote, "The task we set before ourselves is not mechanical but moral and spiritual. We aim not at the alteration of a form of government, but at the building up of a nation." He looked beyond India's freedom, that being a given, to the future strength of India and the role she was destined to play on the world stage, this while India was still not free. He wrote, "We believe that it is to make the yoga the ideal of human life that India rises today." By yoga, obviously, he didn't mean hatha yoga or physical exercises. Yoga is the union of the individual to the divine, the inner principle, individual inner principle, and all life to the divine principle. We believe that it is to make the yoga the ideal of human life that India rises today. By the yoga, she will get the strength to realize her freedom, unity, and greatness. By the yoga, she will keep the strength to preserve it. It is a spiritual revolution we foresee, and the material is only its shadow and reflex. It will be interesting to note here that when we speak of Vedic education, we forget that the rishis, while being not BLEds and BEds, were spiritually realized people who combined all the sciences and arts of human life, and that is the reason why kings sent their sons to them. Obviously not just to learn about life-shunning spirituality. The Vedic rishis were masters both of inner life and outer life, Swarat and Samrat. And this principle was later forgotten, and that's why when there was a disconnect with the inner spiritual reality and strength, things went downhill. It is quite remarkable that in 1909, when the nation was still in the grip of the British and moderate approach of the Congress, and the nationalist strength had been suppressed, Sri Aurobindo stood firm and declared a spiritual ideal and spiritual methodology, not only for India's complete independence, but for her greater role in the rising of Asia and in the rising of humanity as a whole. No other politician before or since has integrated spirituality and politics the way Sri Aurobindo did. It was his firm belief that India was bound to achieve her independence, as the divine was guiding that work. He continued to work in the political field till 1910, when, in response to an inner command, he left Bengal, initially with the idea to return to political action. However, as things unfolded, the divine had other plans for him, and India did become free. Today, we see several of Sri Aurobindo's insights coming true as regards India's role in the world scene and in her own growth. Though Sri Aurobindo retired from Indian politics in 1910, when in 1942 the Cripps mission offered India the Dominion status, Sri Aurobindo sent a note to Sir Stafford Cripps welcoming this initiative. He also sent a note to the Congress in favor of the proposal, as he felt that during the Second World War, the greater threat was Hitler, and all forces needed to unite against him. Hitler's victory would have meant doom for entire humanity. Sri Aurobindo felt that the Dominion status would also give time to India to overcome communal disharmony that had already been generated by then. Unfortunately, the Congress rejected the mission and Sri Aurobindo's letter. As noted by the renowned politician and author K.M. Munshi, had it been accepted, there would have been no partition, no refugees, and no Kashmir problem. To sum up, Sri Aurobindo's contribution was invaluable as it hit at the root of the problem and aimed at building the nation morally, psychologically, intellectually, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. It raised the freedom struggle from a mere political movement to a spiritual movement in service of India, the mother. It set into the Indian psyche the demand for Purna Swaraj and the doctrine of both passive as well as active resistance. It created a roadmap for India's future growth and her role upon the world scene. Sri Aurobindo showed through his person and dynamic action how even politics could be imbued with spirituality, something that the entire world needs to emulate today in order to overcome its conflicts. Thank you.